Hey everyone, Sandy here, the Badass Business Coach, and welcome back to another episode of No More Excuses. Yes, where we cut through all the bullshit and get down to business. Thanks for being here, for listening, sharing the podcast with others, and most importantly, investing in you. Oh, what are we talking about today? Well, the silent profit killer, inefficient processes and procedures. Yes, over the next few minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'll expose those hidden time suckers that are eating away at your bottom line and can affect, if you have staff morale, staff camaraderie, all the shit I deal with on a regular basis with my clients. And I'll give you some tips on how to overcome and help those things not get out of hand. Yes, you just say you have a running business or business that's running. It's going along and things seem great. And all of a sudden it's like a flat tire. It's moving, but something feels off. It's just feeling a little wonky. Well, usually inefficient processes are those flat tires. They're dragging you down. They're making every mile be painful and cost you money and your sanity. They lead to errors, delays, and a team that's more frustrated and just all of those things that go out the door, when you're supposed to have people that are just happy and love their jobs, right? That doesn't always happen. But when you have inefficient processes and procedures, you have times where people are just not doing things the way that you thought they were. And it doesn't actually matter if you're a sole proprietor or not. If you have staff, or perhaps there's just two or three of you, you still need processes and procedures. That way there's consistency, like habits. So fewer communication issues. And as you grow, things are already in place. Yes, inefficient processes are that slow leak that deflates that tire, also the team's morale, and it grinds things down. It affects your productivity, efficiency, and it's the chaos that turns your operation into sometimes a three-ring circus. It's going to be digging in and extra time with research, paperwork, wondering what the hell happened, and get you just out of sorts and shit going sideways, as I like to say. So these processes and procedures, again, from a sole prop to where a multi-million-dollar business, they could be anything from finding and interviewing a prospect to onboarding that prospect that's now a client. How often do you touch base and get information to your bookkeeper or accountant, which may seem silly, but perhaps you need to do things quarterly, monthly, or you're small enough, you just do things yearly? That's okay. But how do you get how do you get that information to them? How do you keep track of everything? If it's invoicing or it's donations or whatever it is, do you have a process for where you put all that information? How do you file things? How do you not cost yourself time? The man candy, haven't talked about him in a while. His process, his procedure to get his mileage done to the accountant every year, he'd have to spend a day going through his whole year calendar, logging those miles, writing them down, and he would be stressed out and bitching and not paying it, not really, well, he was not paying attention all year, except just writing it down. My process was every time I went somewhere, I would write down the start and finish mileage, and it's right there in a little booklet. He, on the other hand, spent the one day every year doing his mileage. That's for him, not for me. So how do you do that? That may seem petty, and tiny and simple. And you're like, it's fine. It's just a few hours. But how is that affecting you? What is that taking away from you? So that's up to you. Things like this are up to you and how you work. That's how I worked. That's how he worked, right? So looking at what's your order process when you get orders from a client, or if someone buys something or you're buying something, do you need a PO? Do you need this? How do you track it? What's your, what is your tracking process? Especially if you're selling things to clients and they're calling going, where is it? What's your process on getting that order in? What's your procedure? How do you make sure that it's on time? I have a client that it's supposed to be 24 to 48 hours to get that project or that order in the system. And it's not happening lately. And I'm hearing about it because it's costing time and money because they're getting more phone calls. Where's my order? Where's my order? Is it in the system? Is it not? Where is it in the stage? So thinking about that as well. Is your employee handbook up to date? Medical leave, absences, late policies. What's your warning process? Your verbal, your written, and then any kind of disciplinary action. As many times small businesses don't think they need clear processes and procedures because they're too small, or we're just a few of us and we can just communicate what we need. We're all adults. We know what we're supposed to do. And then you wake up one day, your business has grown and you're excited, but shit's sideways. Shit has gone sideways. And it doesn't matter if you're making 50,000 a year or 5 million, right? It can go sideways at any time. It's like a habit. You just fall out of habit. You're not following the processes and procedure because they're a hot mess. And it's not just about the extra few minutes or hours that they steal. It's about the opportunities that slip through your fingers because you're too busy putting out fires. It's the customer complaints that pile up because their orders are late or there's errors. It's talented employees who throw in the towel because they can't thrive in a disorganized environment. So that's one of the first things I start poking my nose around in when I have a client, especially a new one, and they share what's going on or not going on. If the challenge is with staff, what's your hiring process, your training process, your disciplinary process? What is your communication like? And what is your team building to keep the team running smoothly and feeling engaged and connected? I have a client who had to put in taking out the trash procedure and schedule because, well, no one was. It's, end up being like one or two people. And then, there's people pointing fingers. There's animosity because they're always taking the trash out. And sometimes the place just looked a mess because no one was doing it. Whose turn is it? Who hasn't done it? Well, now there's a schedule, right? And cell phone policies. I've had clients that have to do this because there's people on their phone not doing their job. We're so ingrained in social media. You got to get your TikTok or Instagram or your Reels fix, right? Or just one more thing. I had a client years ago who had to he was the owner and he had to ground himself from ESPN because he would get in the office and immediately get online and start looking at ESPN, and then 45 minutes, an hour later, he hadn't done any work. So he had to switch that to be a reward. And I know that's not necessarily a procedure per se, but it was something he had to look into. And as he started growing, if people come in and see him on there, or then what about his staff? Are the staff allowed to get on and check social media or ESPN or whatever? Or are they supposed to do that on their break? So again, these things seem simple, but if you're doing something, just because you're the owner doesn't mean that somebody else might not pick up on it as well, right? And checklist. What's the procedure to open? What's the procedure to close? When I worked at McDonald's when I was in high school, you better bet there was a freaking process and procedure. There was steps for everything. How to open up the shake machine. I was an opener, so I used to have to do that. And at night they had to close it and clean it. What's your process and what's your procedure to get the drive-through open, to get the breakfast things going, to get the dinner things going, that transition over? It was like clockwork. And if somebody forgot to do something here or there or did it wrong, somebody wasn't getting their quarter pounder with cheese at 10:35 in the morning. You've got upset customers. Again, it's simple things, but they make a huge difference. So even if you're a sole prop, again, think about what you do and don't do, right? It doesn't matter because you got to have those things in place. Because even if you hire your first intern, well, they're going to ask you, how do you do this? What's the process for this? What's your procedure for this? How do you do this? How often should I talk to the client? Things like that. Okay. So tip number one, let's do this because we don't want anything to zap your energy because you've got enough of your heart and soul into this business. Let's help it grow instead of just sucking the life out of you. All right. So tip number one, audit like a hawk. You're checking your goals and you don't know what's broken if you don't know what's going on, and you got to figure out how to fix it. You can't fix what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? So like you check your goals, just dive into your current processes, map them out, and sometimes you can spot the bottlenecks, which could be you. Look for repetitive tasks that can be automated, things that are unnecessary that can be eliminated. I talk about do it or pay for it. What things can be delegated? And if part of the process causes you to say, what the heck? Why do we even do this? More like, what the hell? Or when did we stop doing this? You get out of habit and shit starts going sideways, right? Tip number two, write it down. What happens if you've got everything in your head and you're sick, or you want to go on vacation, or you get run over by a bus? Don't expect people to know what the hell to do if you've got it all in your head or you've verbalized it. Not everybody can remember everything. So make a checklist like the opening procedure, closing procedure, and write it down, post it, put it in an employee handbook, put it in just a processes and procedures book. I did that years ago when I was volunteering for a school foundation for the up and running program. It was like, who do you contact? How often? When is registration open? I mean, there were steps because if something happened to me, or if the next year I didn't want to do it, someone could grab that binder and know how to do everything. And yes, I've had clients that are like, they had constant turnover. And I asked them, what's your training process? And the manager was like, we don't have one. I just talk them through it. They're attached to my hip. I said, well, you're going to write one? And she's like, I don't have time. I said, do you have time to keep hiring? Because people are quitting because it's not consistent. They don't, what if you get pulled over here or you're out that day? You're sitting there like, I don't know what to do because I wasn't told what to do. Get the freaking processes and procedures written down. And tip number three, if you have staff, train to maintain. So that kind of goes along with that writing it down, the training process. The best processes are worthless if your team doesn't know how to use them. Invest in training, invest in team building. Have me do it. I love it. But do it consistently. Make sure everyone's up to speed on the latest and greatest ways to work smarter, not harder. I train DISC all the time, and that is a great thing to have people understand because you're communicating. A team well trained is one that's empowered and efficient. And I talk about efficiencies and productivity all the time because that's what's going to make or break your business. Insufficient processes are the termites of profitability. So quietly just chopping away at your hard-earned cash and your hard-ass work. So audit, write it down, and train to retain. I know that may seem like a lot, but watch my social media all week as I break these bits down. And I'd love to hear some of your process and procedures. What have you learned over the years by not having or having? What has helped you? What perhaps a new process or procedure you put in place has saved your business, right? So think about it. Email me, Sandi at sandiballard.com, Sandi with an I. Check out my website, badassbusiness.coach, and catch you next time. And until then, be badass. Cheers.